Today we are going to paint an owl. I'm working in Adobe Photoshop on my Wacom Cintiq for this. Usually when I do my drawings and sketches, I start out on paper. Sometimes I'll go directly digital as I'm doing with this piece. It's a fairly small piece, so I'm not too worried about, detailing out the sketch a whole lot beforehand because there's going to be so many changes in the painting process itself. I'm working on multiple layers for this, so every time I make major changes to the illustration, I start a new layer in Photoshop. For the brushes, I'm using a mixture of Kyle's brushes that Photoshop now comes with, and then I'm using some by Greg Wacom that you can find on Gumroad. I will leave a link down in the comments for that. So this owl is going to be like a wizard's animal companion or familiar, something like that. So she's going to have little knickknacks and stuff, which I'm working on here. I'm trying to keep it to fairly natural colors for this piece. I don't want it to be too strange. I like the idea of kind of crossing over with something that could be realistic, but it's a little into the fantastical realm. It's generally a theme of a lot of the artwork I do. It's kind of this mix of realism and fantasy. It's really hard painting feathers. The way I found to go about it is kind of look at feathers like the way you would look at painting fur. You're going to go with large shapes and then you kind of add a little grit and detail to it to get it that feathery look. It would be the same when you're painting fur, you're trying to get that fluffy look, so that's how I approach painting feathers. As for the equipment she's carrying, I'm using reference to kind of find out how to paint that leathery texture for the backpack. And then I'm going to look up some photos of bottles to reference how the liquid is going to look in the bottles. So as I mentioned, a lot of this process is fairly organic. I'm just kind of trying stuff out, seeing what works, what doesn't work. Here I'm adjusting the body and just kind of making her a little more, I guess, owl-shaped. So now I'm trying to find out what exactly I want to do with a little cross strap over her chest. Adding some detail to the backpack. It's not an overly structured painting approach. When I work for clients, I will do detailed sketches to send to them. But when I'm just doing little quick pieces for myself, I'm just gonna kind of like go with the flow and have fun with it, which is what this illustration was for. It's not for anything in particular. It's not even gonna be in my portfolio. It was just to make some little frame pieces to have for Gen Con. Now, when adding items to characters, I like to kind of think about what kind of personality does the character have, how can the items kind of tie into its personality. I'm hoping that these items that this owl has kind of adds to its, like, who it is, this little weird creature that has scrolls and a wand and kind of hinting at that maybe it's a spellcaster itself, or maybe it's a familiar to a wizard, you don't know. It's all ways you can kind of add storytelling even to simple illustrations. This is going to be printed at 2.5 by 3 inches, so it's very small. Knowing that it's getting printed so small is also one of the reasons that the rendering is not going to be as tight as it would be on some of my larger illustrations. I'm still keeping this fairly loose. This full piece took about 2 hours, I think, and so obviously what you're watching is heavily sped up. So touching back on having a sketch before you start out, when you do have a detailed sketch, you work all of the corrections and all of the details and everything out in that sketching phase, and that means you have less changes to make when you go into doing the painting. So a lot of the adjustments that I'm doing on this illustration as I move along would have been worked out in the sketching phase rather than being kind of figured out as you go along. It's all just, different ways of working, and when you work with other people, obviously it's preferable that you have the details worked out before you go into coloring, but when you're just doing work for yourself, you can do whatever you want. I like doing that more natural approach and letting things kind of changes as I go along with it, and other people prefer having more structured sketches. It's all up to the individual artist. There's no right or wrong. So here I'm starting to add some details to the backpack. I really like adding stuff like, buckles and stitches, little effects of light glow and stuff like that on it. It just makes it come alive in a way. So that's something that, it adds character. And then I'm working a little bit on her facial expression. I want her to be a happy owl, so giving her a little bit of a smile and some fluffy, kind of that horned owl effect with the hair coming out, or the feathers rather, it's not hair. Owls have really interesting legs, you know. When they're sitting down, it looks like they're short, but I saw some photos of them. They actually have pretty long legs. It's just that their feathers kind of come down and cover all of it. It's pretty interesting. When you're doing stuff like leather buckles and belts, adding depth or adding like an underside or overside to the leather really can help it to, you know, have more volume, seem more real. It took me a while to figure that out, so yeah. It's all a learning progress as you're painting. You just pick up little bits here and there as you go along and as you watch other artists work. Some of my favorite artists to learn from on YouTube are Marco Bucci, Cintiq, Adam Duff, and Proco, of course. Proco is fantastic for anatomy. He's definitely a must follow. Bobby Chu also has some really great content when it comes to painting and learning stuff about the industry. Other ones that are good to watch, Happy D Artist has a really great channel too. Fran Menses, I don't know, I love following how she goes about her everyday and the things she do. She's really lovely. So at this point, the owl is pretty much how I want it. So I'm gonna start to work on the environment that she's in, working on the branch, adding a lot of textures to it, trying to make it come alive, make that lichen look correct, adding some leaves, making it a little bit of an autumn setting. It also adds a tiny bit of movement to the image. Like, it's a pretty static image. Then I'm doing some color correction, and lastly I'm adding in light. Pretty much for all of my artwork, I'm gonna do the major parts of like the light structuring near the end of the illustration. Once I kind of have everything worked out, I'll go in and I'll change around the light and the shadows. This one has a fairly simple lighting scheme, so there's not going to be too many changes. Working a little bit of on her eye and her face here, and then some more light changes, just trying stuff out and see what works and what doesn't. And then here we have it. This is the final illustration. A little three-eyed owl. And here you can see how it looks framed. It's a very small little thing. And yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching this time lapse. There is going to be more videos coming. Have a great week, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.